Hello, this is Peter Bell, and I'm here with Mr. Tyler Ruks of Arcwest Exploration. Hello, Tyler.
Hey, Peter, thanks for taking the time to chat today.
Wonderful to have a Skype call. This is the first time I've had a Skype call, and the video quality is much better than with Uber Conference. So that's important for some of these pictures that we have to look at. Important that the audience can get a clear view of them. So I'll stop the recording now and check that the file works okay, and then we'll get into it.
Okay, excellent. I'll stand by.
And I think we're going to have to end the call to do that. Hello, this is Peter Bell, and I'm here with Mr. Tyler Ruks of Arcwest Exploration. Hello, Tyler.
Hi, Peter.
We've got the first page of your presentation up. I always love looking at these first pages and talking about them. What are we looking at?
Peter, you're looking at one of the largest undrilled Gaussons in the Golden Triangle, possibly in British Columbia. I think we're in a good position to be able to say that because between myself, Jeff Kaiba, Joanne Nelson, John Bradford, we spent a tremendous amount of our time exploring throughout British Columbia over the years. This is one of the most exceptional targets we've come across thus far, and we're looking forward to moving this thing and other projects in our portfolio ahead in 2019.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure to talk with some geologists who are working in the desert in Egypt, and there's been some great exposure of Gausson there. And to see this, very interesting stuff. The chemistry that goes on with all of this geology, very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. This thing is called Yellow Bowl. It's part of our Todd Creek project, which is located 45 kilometers southeast of the giant Kerr Sulphurettes Mitchell Iron Cap Porphyry Copper Gold deposit that's owned by Seabridge. And that's certainly our focus at Arcwest, is exploring early stage porphyry copper gold targets for things that could turn into something far more significant. We've got a lot of experience doing that.
And so this picture,
yeah,
in the distance, that different colored rock, was that above the glaciation?
Yeah, for much of this area's lifetime, Peter, it's been covered by snowpack and ice. This is, I'm sure you're familiar with this story, but the Golden Triangle is probably one of the few places globally that's actually benefiting from climate change. Glaciers are receding every year, and in their wake, they're creating new exposures of bedrock. And oftentimes, especially in a place as well endowed as the Golden Triangle, you're exposing brand new base and precious metal occurrences that have never been seen by previous workers. And Yellow Bowl is certainly one of these targets. The snow has receded at an exceptional rate over the past 10 years, and it's exposed widespread copper occurrences and these fantastic Gaussons, all of which we are interpreting as the products of a porphyry copper gold system that's never seen a drill hole before. I don't think I've ever seen a Gausson this big with so many widespread copper occurrences that hasn't seen a drill hole in it. It's an exceptional target, and we couldn't be more excited to have it in our portfolio.
I wonder about the technical side of it, right? Covered in ice and snow would make me think lots of water circulating, right? And the processes there with the oxidation, I believe, that's happening.
Yep, absolutely. What we're seeing here at Yellow Bowl, essentially all of the orange color is a manifestation of the oxidation of astounding amounts of pyrite. And one thing about porphyries is they have huge footprints in the outer shells of these systems. They're very, very pyrite rich. So when you see this amount of pyrite over an area the size of Yellow Bowl, there are very sort of few systems from a metallogenic standpoint that could be responsible for this. And without a doubt, we think it's a porphyry. The thing's absolutely full of hydrothermal, magmatic, and intrusive breccias, some of which are bringing up variably altered porphyritic intrusive clasts that contain trace chalcopyrite. All of these breccias coalesce in a really significant IP anomaly at relatively shallow depths. and we're really looking forward to testing this thing with the drill bit.
I wonder where things might have been in the past. These rocks, right? Now that they're up on the top of a mountain.
Yeah, absolutely. So, from a tectonic standpoint, we're looking at the Stikine terrain. That's one of the intermontane terrains, and these things were essentially oceanic arcs that formed off the western margin of North America around 200 million years ago. A good analog would be sort of Japan or the Philippines. But of course, these things have since been smashed onto the western side of North America, subject to further tectonics. They've been uploaded and eroded, and now we're essentially seeing the guts of these things, which are the porphyry copper gold systems. And that's what we see at KSM, what we see at Red Chris, Shaft Creek, Galore Creek. Certainly some of the largest porphyry copper gold systems in North America are part of these old 200, 190 MA arcs.
And so this and KSM, similar possible age range.
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. We've collected a bunch of samples of the host rock here for geochronology. I did a lot of geochronology for my PhD at UBC. It's something that we're intimately familiar with, and we're hoping to get these things processed sooner than later. But on paper, and certainly with our couple of weeks of field work on the property this year, we believe we're comfortably in the Lower Hazelton group here, and that's the postal code where you want to be in if you're looking for elephant-sized deposits like KSM, and even Red Chris, Shaft Creek. They're all part of this 200 MA late Triassic, early Jurassic arc.
And so why is it that this one doesn't have a drill hole in it yet? Is it really just the climate change?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Peter. Certainly climate change plays a role. For much of this thing's lifetime, it's been covered by ice and snow, so previous workers just didn't get a chance to see the mineralization that we're seeing. For the past 10, 15 years, the property was owned by a little private company that called Geofine. They did some fantastic work on the project.
And has there been any regional work on, downstream geochem, even, water sampling? I would think something like this it would still be leaching quite a lot of metal potentially, and sulfides and things going downstream. And
you got her. Yeah, absolutely, Peter. One of the things that we like to look at from an exploration standpoint when we're looking for porphyries, one of the first pass things that you do, especially in this neck of the woods, is a stream set geochemical survey. And one of the fingerprints for a porphyry copper gold system, especially systems like these late Triassic, early Jurassic ones, we look for coincident copper tellurium anomalies, and so there, without a doubt, some good ones downstream of Yellow Bull.
Tellurium, TE, right? The etymology of the name, I believe, is Keith Barron told me once it was from great depth or something like this. Is Latin, maybe? I don't know. Pretty cool. Well, that's 6 minutes since I started the recording and 8 minutes on the clock here, so we should wrap it up before too long. I wonder, there's so much work to do on a project like this. They say porphyries are built, not discovered. That there's something here. It's about defining it, putting your arms around it. It's a lot of work, expensive. I wonder, field work, surface work, geophysics, ground-based geophysics, like drone-based. Would you do drone-based magnetics up here? Drone-based LiDAR, like seismic? Like what kind of stuff could you?
Yeah, excellent question, Peter. And I'm really happy to hear you say that. Porphyries are built. I really like that. And with your permission, I'm going to steal that for future interviews.
Well, credit to a former student of your, Brad Peters, is from Pacific Empires, who I picked that up from. It's a great saying.
Excellent. No, I think that's a fantastic way to look at these systems. We're a project generator. Our MO for moving all of our projects forward will be marketing these to mid-tier and major mining companies. That's certainly something we've had a huge amount of success doing in the past. And all of these companies have a similar mindset, and that's to do it right. Start from the ground floor, start with basic things like bedrock mapping, alteration studies. Geophysics, as you pointed out, is critical. We've already done 6 kilometers of IP on the property already, just in September of 2018, including a 3-kilometer line that went right through the guts of Yellow Bowl and demonstrated that there's a big chargeability anomaly right underneath this big goss. And so we do have drill targets on the property, but Todd Creek is huge. It's 35,000 hectares in size.
Yeah.
We're essentially preserving the entirety of the Hazelton Arc, 200 million through 170 million years worth of Earth's history. We're just scratching the surface on this thing. So as I said, we do have drill targets, but the question is, can we generate superior targets? And I think we can if we partner up with a major mining company and hit this thing with a big stick. We could definitely use additional IP. We literally only had 2 weeks worth of work on the project before the snow started flying.
Wow.
So we definitely need to revisit this thing in order to refine our current exploration models.
I hope somebody commits to spend upwards of $50 million on the whole thing, because it's I've seen the maps on it. It's stupendous.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Peter. I'm happy to hear you say it's an exceptional project. We couldn't be happier to have this thing in the portfolio. And over the past year, we've seen majors endorsing the porphyry copper gold projects in Northwest British Columbia. Newcrest just purchased 80% of Red Chris for 800 million. That's a fantastic endorsement of the district, especially the depth potential of these copper gold systems. Yesterday, I saw Newmont Gold Corp just purchased 19.9% of GT Gold. So that's another one of the BC porphyries gone. They did the same thing with Galore Creek. And the question is, what's next? KSM Iron Cap is an obvious target. But there aren't too many big PC porphyries that are up for grabs. And certainly with Arcwest, we've got 700 square kilometers of highly prospective land under our control in the Golden Triangle. As you know, most of the triangle is controlled by KSM Pretium. So this represents one of the few opportunities in the Golden Triangle for a major in order to get a toehold in the district. Yeah. And as you know, dealing with $10-20 billion mining companies takes a long time to do. But once you do it, it pays dividends, and it'll be an opportunity for Todd Creek to be explored properly from the ground up.
Well, and I have no idea what that's like, really, but I know that you do to some degree, right? And particularly from the junior side. So having that in place there for you as CEO of Arcwest here is great and very important.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Yeah, we've been really fortunate to have had a lot of success on the project generation side in the past. In 2011, we founded our first project generator called West Cirque Resources. Shortly after that, we acquired a large land position in the Golden Triangle, including a property which is literally right next door to GT Gold's porphyry copper gold discovery in the Saddle Zone. That was a project called Castle. We also had our Tanzilla and Pliny projects. We were lucky to auction all of those projects off to Freeport in an $8 million deal. And I think we had 3 or 4 years of drilling with Freeport. They were an absolutely fantastic partner. We'd absolutely love to work with them again at Arcwest.
How much did they spend over those 3-4 years? Was that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Peter. I know we had probably 4 years worth of drilling. Our company, West Cirque, was acquired in 2014 by Robert Friedland's Kaizen Discovery, but that relationship with Freeport continued beyond my tenure with that company. So
that was done with Kaizen. Yeah,
that's correct. You betcha. And we've worked quite closely with some very large Japanese trading houses. After the Kaizen transaction, one of our first tasks were to essentially work with Itochu in order to move our early stage porphyry copper gold targets in British Columbia forward. And we were successful in doing that. One of the projects that we acquired with West Zurich was a really big land position in between Copper Mountain and Highland Valley, an early stage porphyry copper gold target called Aspen Grove.
In southern BC, right? Southern
Yeah,
BC.
yeah, absolutely.
Great place to be.
Awesome place to work, sort of the exact opposite of the Golden Triangle as far as logistics are concerned. So you don't need helicopters. Exploration is a lot cheaper.
It's so telling about the prospectivity of BC. I was hearing about coal projects, Tumbler Ridge area yesterday. I was just absolutely floored by, the potential for British Columbia to be a world leader in mining. The need for it, really, I'd say.
Absolutely. No, the endowment is here. The province is, incredibly prospective, just from a hard rock and a soft rock standpoint. All of the majors are here looking around. We just talked about different majors that have made moves on porphyry copper gold deposits in the Northwest over the past year. We know for a fact that Rio Tinto, BHP, and other groups are having a hard look at the province as well. And that's a fantastic thing for groups like Arcwest.
And maybe one more thing I'll mention about what I heard yesterday in regards to that coal company was that management had a prior win where they had signed a deal with a Anglo or one of these top global mining companies on a coal project, and they'd signed the deal valued based on project economics, not based on market cap. So there was this company that was trading for like 50 cents a share or something, and it paid out like a $2 dividend. And
that's fantastic.
And that was a junior mining company.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the same argument could essentially be made for Imperial. Without a doubt, their market cap was, certainly what it's not what it is now. After the Newcrest deal, it's nice to see major mining companies recognize the value in these deposits.
Well, and you look at Arcwest at $5 or $10 million Canadian market cap right now, and cash in the bank and work programs, I believe, too. Lots more to discuss. So, thank you very much. Let's call it here.
Excellent. Okay, right on, Peter. One of the things that we like best about Todd Creek, aside from Yellow Bull, it's essentially an ocean of gossans. Yellow Bull is certainly big. It's probably the biggest undrilled gossan in the Triangle, maybe in BC, but it's part of a much larger system that's essentially concentrated along Todd Creek itself, which we think is probably one of these late Triassic, early Jurassic structures that played such an important role in the development of these absolutely gigantic porphyry copper gold systems that we've got in the area and throughout the district at large. Todd Creek itself, we think it's part of a much larger structure tied into the American Creek Fault to the west. It's more or less parallel to the Sulphurettes Fault, which is genetically related to the emplacement of the supergiant Kerr Sulphurettes Mitchell iron cap cluster that's under control by Seabridge. So structure is really important, and we couldn't be luckier to have people like Jeff Kaiba and Joanne Nelson on our team, who are authorities on the geology and metallurgy of the Golden Triangle district. We couldn't be luckier to have them, and they're structural geology gurus. It's always important to have people like that on your team. So Todd Creek, close to the Todd Creek Fault, we essentially have a 12-kilometer belt of rusty rock. And it's not just rusty rock. The rusty rock is endowed with base and precious metals. And if you look at Yellow Bull, and if you were to draw sort of an ellipse around Yellow Bull, Fall Creek, Knob Zone, and South Zone, these occurrences are predominantly copper gold enriched. And if you step outside of that zone, Peter, you start to see more of a polymetallic signature. Some more precious metal enrichment, lots of lead in the system, lots of barite, lots of epithermal style mineralization. And what we think we're seeing here is sort of a crude metal zonation, akin to what you see in gigantic porphyry copper gold systems, where you've got the copper gold in the core above the porphyry. And that's what we think we're seeing at Yellow Bull, Fall Creek, South Zone, and Knob Zone. And you get into more distal, more lower temperature epithermal settings as you step outside of that core. So there's a metal zonation on the property. So we think underneath Yellow Bull, we're looking at a porphyry system. Interestingly, as you step out towards Fall Creek and South Zone, you see copper gold enrichment as well, but the style of mineralization we see is somewhat different than what we see at Yellow Bull. South Zone has seen a fair amount of historic drilling, and it's also host to a non-43-101 compliant resource, around 200,000 tons, 6 grams. And there's actually a fair amount of copper associated with that as well. The mineralization is associated with almost like an epithermal vein system. Lots of chalcedonic quartz, associated breccias, lots of jasperoidal silica, lots of hematite dusting, and lots of gold-enriched chalcopyrite. So it's not porphyry copper gold mineralization sensu stricto, and one of the closest analogs that we can find for this style of mineralization globally is Sandstorm's Hodmodden project in Turkey, which is an amazing deposit, but I think it's a bit of a head scratcher for the exploration community as to what Hodmodden actually is. Ditto for Fall Creek and South Zone. What we can say about all of these things, South Zone, Fall Creek, and Hodmodden, is that they contain lots of copper and lots of high-grade gold. We did some grab sampling at Fall Creek this year. I think our best sample ran around 5% copper and over an ounce gold. Fantastic stuff. The mineralization in both of the zones is open in several directions. And in the case of South Zone, we actually had an IP line go right past the south end of it. And there's a really interesting chargeability feature underneath the zone that hasn't been tested. After having a look at the structural geology here, we think South Zone is a downdrop block. So all things being equal, maybe there's a Yellow Bull style porphyry system lurking underneath South Zone as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear American Creek fault mentioned there. That's not something I've heard a lot of in the Golden Triangle. I'd ask the Hodmodden, any sense of similarity of some big structural, tectonic scale faults at that setting, and is it really this valley here that we're looking at that really is tied in with the American Creek fault?
That's exactly it, Peter. If you have a look at Todd Creek at Google Earth, you can definitely see that Todd Creek is probably part of the American Creek lineament, which is just to the west. And beyond that, if you look at the regional geophysical data for this area, particularly the magnetics, this stuff sticks out like crazy. It's definitely a crustal scale structure, and Jeff, being a fantastic structural geologist, made the keen observation that this structure actually projects right into our Ouija Dome project to the north, which is just west of the giant KSM iron cap system. So all of this stuff is related from a tectonic standpoint.
Yeah.
And to further confuse the issue here, Peter, as we move to the west, to the east at Todd Creek, we get into younger rocks. As I said earlier, we probably have 30 to 50 million years of geologic time preserved on the property as you move from Yellow Bull to the VMS zone to the east. So at Yellow Bull, we're probably in the right rocks for a KSM or Red Chris style system. We're probably right at the late Triassic, early Jurassic boundary. But as you move east, you get into younger stratigraphy. And we think here in what we're calling the VMS zone, we're in the middle Jurassic. And if you're in the middle Jurassic in Stikine terrain, that's a fantastic place to be from an exploration standpoint, because the rocks are prospective for precious metal enriched VMS systems. And of course, the best example of one of those is the famous SK Creek deposit. Yeah. So the VMS zone is aptly named. It was discovered in 2008 by Geofine, the previous owners of the property, who did a fantastic job of moving the property forward over the years. It's literally outcropping polymetallic high-grade VMS mineralization that was exposed in the wake of this little great glacier just to the southeast. It was found in 2008. We all know what happened in 2008. The world fell apart. Risk capital essentially evaporated for mineral exploration. So this thing has not been drilled, and it's not just one outcrop of high-grade polymetallic VMS mineralization. It's many over a large area, and it's never been drilled. I've spent a long time working in the Golden Triangle, especially looking for things like the next Eskay Creek. I've never seen a prospect like this that isn't a pincushion. So it's amazing. So not only does Todd Creek have Yellow Bowl, one of the biggest gossans in the GT, it hasn't seen a hole. We also have a fantastic zone of outcropping VMS mineralization, 5 to 10 kilometers to the southeast of it that hasn't been drilled. Jeff and the gang found another zone of Eskay style stratigraphy at the north side of the property. They're calling it Smoking Zone. You can see there's a big zone of ice smack in the middle. All these outcrops are brand new. It's a gigantic gossan. You look at the scale here, 2 kilometers, and we're definitely looking at rocks that have the potential to contain one of these shallow marine hydrothermal systems that's necessary for making an Eskay Creek style deposit. We did a bunch of geochemical sampling there. We got lots of anomalous pathfinder elements, epithermal style. We saw some small kicks in gold as well. But again, we only spent 2 weeks on the property before the snow started flying. So we're in many senses just scratching the surface here.
And it's stunning to see this detail view of the broader property, because this is one valley effectively running north-south there down the middle, right? And then all this ice glacial stuff off to the sides. And I wonder, glaciation running over knob there, and is the lines of weakness, right? Structural geology, again, some thoughts on all that, I'm sure, developing. And
yep, you're absolutely right, Peter. You see these big valleys forming in zones of weakness, and zones of weakness in the Earth's crust are usually the manifestation of faults, where you've had deformation, rocks are being broken up, they're easily eroded. You see that in the case of porphyry systems, where you have big outer alteration shells that are absolutely loaded with clays and micas. They're not very resistant to erosion. So all of these things tend to form in the same areas, especially in the Golden Triangle. They're all genetically related. And that's probably why we're seeing a big valley here, and it's probably why we're seeing a lot of ice in places as well. So,
and again, regional geophysics, has this been an area for any recent or tighter spacing work, or any discussion of Geoscience BC doing some airborne stuff around here, or done?
That's a really good point, Peter. We haven't paid a tremendous amount of attention to the regional geophysical data for Todd Creek, because we've got better data in our possession that was flown by Geofine and previous owners of the property at much tighter line spacing,
okay.
So better resolution. And that's actually a fantastic segue to the next part of our conversation, where we actually have a quick look at the Todd Creek 3D model. We can look at the geophysics. We can have a quick look at the results of our 2018 IP program, and hopefully we can communicate to the audience why we're just so excited about the property.
Let's do it.
Sounds good.
Hello again. This is Peter Bell here with Tyler Ruks, and I have a special treat for you all, a view over his shoulder looking into some geological software. Tyler.
Excellent. Right on, Peter. So what we're looking at here is a 3D model of our Todd Creek project. And in order to help the audience get a sense of the lay of the land here, and can you see my cursor moving around?
I can, yes.
You can?
And I'll move mine off to the side so that it's not in the way.
Okay, so the best way to orient yourselves here is just by looking at the little dots on the map. So this cluster over here of pink circles.
Yep.
These are grab samples from Yellow Bowl. So this is essentially the Yellow Bull zone, 3 kilometers north-south. It's completely open to the south where it disappears under a glacier. And then that Gossan comes out on the other side. We don't have any samples there yet, and we're looking forward to sampling this thing in this field season.
There's a nice bit of vertical exposure there too. The gradient vertically there with that steep side
absolutely.
could prove very, very insightful for you.
Yeah, so the colors we're looking at here, this is mag, right? So
and I don't mean the colors. I mean that southern part where the Gossan comes out the other side. It's relatively steep there, so you get quite a lot of vertical difference.
Really point.
Yeah, so in terms of the vertical model, the vertical aspect of the porphyry model, if there's differences around what you'll see.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Peter. And, one of the nice things about looking at the late Triassic, early Jurassic systems in BC, there are a couple exceptions to this rule, but the vast majority of these porphyries are sitting upright. And, as Imperial demonstrated at Red Chris, if you deep drill test these things, you've got the opportunity to find some exceptionally high-grade copper-gold resources underneath. That was also replicated at KSM, and resulted in the discovery of Kerr Deep. So it's certainly important in all of these systems, as you pointed out, in order to get down in the creeks, get in the valleys, and have a poke around. It's a great opportunity to get into higher temperature environments where you might start to see a porphyry copper gold system. So yeah, good, excellent observation. Difference
between sinking a 1,000-meter hole from 500 meters up at the top of the mountain there versus 500 or 1,000. I don't even know how many vertical. Yeah, look forward to seeing what happens to this project over time. It's can imagine seeing it in 20 years looking very different.
Yeah. Well, hopefully there's a big pit there.
In 20 years, yes. That hopefully on that timeline, right? They'll be deep underground.
Yeah. So what we've done here, Peter, is we've essentially overlain the magnetics data on a digital elevation model. And all of the little circles you're seeing are geochemical samples from our 2018 program. Essentially, the bigger the sphere, the better the anomaly. So we're essentially looking at copper grades here. So I think at Yellow Bull, where my cursor is, I think we had 50 samples that ran around 0.7% copper. Historic samples from the zone ran up to 2 grams. It's definitely gold enriched. And an interesting thing, too, with Yellow Bull is as you drop down in elevation in the system, it seems to get a bit more gold rich. That's a thesis that we'd like to test this field season.
And can I ask about the spacing and the plans on those? So those are grabs, selective.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it was essentially one of the focuses of our work in 2018 was essentially just to develop an initial exploration model for the project. Get out to Yellow Bull, see what's there. We definitely knew that previous workers had found some high-grade copper gold enriched breccias. Were there more? The answer to that is definitely yes.
Yeah.
The snow had definitely melted back since 2018, and that exposed what we're calling the Yellow Bull South zone here, nice. Which is somewhat more polymetallic. There's a bit of zinc and lead kicking around in the system as well, but definitely a large area where we're seeing high-grade copper gold mineralization.
I wonder about that area to the north there in the Yellow Bull. Yeah, that one. That's pretty much along a ridge line, it looks like almost, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll zoom in here. You guys can have a look. And just to give you an idea of scale, so what we're seeing here, these 2 lines, these are essentially the traces of our IP lines from our 2018 survey. So each of these lines are 3 kilometers in length to give you an idea of how big this system actually is. And what we're seeing here too at Yellow Bull, and this is no surprise because we're seeing a huge zone of rusty rock and lots of pyrite, is we're seeing a relative mag low. And what that is the manifestation of is magnetite destructive alteration, which is the hallmark of the outer shells, alteration shells of porphyry copper gold systems, where you're seeing the predominance of things like quartz sericite, pyrite alteration, and in other systems, maybe not at Yellow Bull, advanced argillic alteration as well. So we're seeing a mag low on the property, Peter, and that's a good thing to see. We're seeing magnetite destructive alteration. It's showing that there are a lot of hydrothermal fluids moving around.
Please, can you give it a bit of angle on the view there?
Absolutely. Let's see. Bear with me here. Here we go.
The lines,
So what we're looking at here, Peter, this is cell zone, right? So 200,000 tons, close to 6 grams, lots of copper kicking around. This is a Hod Modern style system. Lots of jasperoidal silica, lots of hematite dusting. And the really cool thing about our IP survey, we had a line go just to the south of it, and you can actually see there's a small chargeability anomaly just to the south of cell zone. So that demonstrates that this thing is open, right? We already knew that based on the drilling, but the geophysics confirms that. But even more interesting is that with depth, we see the chargeability systematically increasing. We've got a 20 millivolt plus anomaly at depth. And the question is, what is this thing? We can get into it with 400 or 500 meter holes. Is there a Yellow Bull style system underneath this? Is this Hod Modern style mineralization sort of the upper manifestations of a more deeply seated porphyry copper gold system? It's exciting stuff. And when you see these kind of anomalies close to the end of a line, that just begs for more geophysics. So that brings back what you said earlier. It's a huge property, widespread mineral occurrences, huge alteration zones. We're barely scratching the surface here, and in 2019 we really got to do it right.
Well, and it's years and years and years of work ahead, right? This is the reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, porphyries are built. Yeah, Brad Peters, thank you for that. And so the second IP line, Peter, essentially went through the guts of Yellow Bull. And as I mentioned earlier, Yellow Bull is absolutely teeming with a variety of different breccias. All of them are essentially copper gold enriched. Some are a bit more polymetallic to the south. All of them are essentially east-west striking and vertically dipping. They're highly discordant to the stratigraphy. So the bedrock is sort of moderately dipping to the east, and these breccias all cross-cut the stratigraphy at very high angles. They're vertically dipping. That's really important. And you can actually see these things in the IP. You can see this little finger coming up here to the surface. These are vertically dipping. Simcoe Geophysics, they provided some exceptional service on the project in a very limited timeline, and that was one of the first things they noticed. They could see all of these breccias while they were doing the lines. They could see the malachite bleeding out of the slope, and they said, "Boy, these things have fantastic response. They're vertically dipping." And when Riaz Mirza, the principal of Simcoe, showed us some of the preliminary reductions in the evening, there was sort of a collective gasp from the audience as we all noticed that these breccias coalesce into something far larger and more significant at depth. And we can test these with some relatively short drill holes, 300, 400 meters.
And some surface work too, right? I see there's no grabs done any of, not even the one that seems to come closest, right? And
absolutely.
Talking about copper stuff at surface showing, I wonder the tourmaline breccia pipe model potentially at play with that particular area.
Oh, excellent. Have you been reading about Chicana?
The whole thing, and examples in BC apparently too. This is a pretty one of the basic parts of porphyries, as I understand it.
Yeah, awesome, Peter. There has been tourmaline documented with quartz-sericite pyrite veins in the cell zone. We've got to relog the core in order to verify that those things are actually present. They're definitely described in previous assessment reports. Tourmaline is a difficult mineral to mistake when you're logging, so I've got no reason to believe that it's not there, but certainly something that we'd like to confirm independently. In terms of alteration minerals, up at Yellow Bowl, there's been a fair amount of shortwave infrared done by previous workers. Sandy Perry out of the States, she's done a lot of work with Freeport in the past. She did some great work on the project, and she identified lots of hydrothermal muscovite at Yellow Bowl. And that's the hallmarks of QSP alteration or phyllic alteration, right? And assuming the system is upright, the potassic, where we're having enhanced copper gold mineralization, is somewhere at depth here. So that's essentially the model. But another really cool thing about the IP, Peter, is
well, and it's neat how those two lines kind of converge too, right? And there seems to even be some, similarity between that second line that you did coming off and continuity, implied continuity, and the stuff you're seeing at depth, and it's great.
Absolutely, Peter. Yeah, that's a fantastic observation. It says we'll just spin behind it, so we can see the Yellow Bowl main line here.
How high is the pink reading there? Is that 100 plus?
We're looking at 20 millivolts.
So the pink is plus 20, or?
Yeah, it's maximum 20 millivolts and just a bit above. So.
Yep. Okay.
Which is pretty typical for porphyry copper gold systems. Our Tanzilla lithocap, just to the southeast of Dees, that was picked up by Kaizen when they acquired West Cirque Resources. We were essentially looking at a system that was far less eroded. In our view, we had a real lithocap preserved, and one thing about lithocaps is they contain just massive amounts of pyrite, and in terms of chargeability responses, we were seeing like 40 to 50 milliseconds, right? So
I think what is it, Julian Resources with a plus 100, 120 or something.
Yeah,
on Big Brother and Aspen Grove area. Yeah, no, the full set of drill results aren't out from their winter campaign, but a Southern BC exploration story that's interesting.
That's right. Yeah, we know their president, Charlie Chang, very well. He worked with my partners, John Bradford and Nigel at Southwestern back in the day, predominantly in South America, in Chile and Peru. So. Yeah, great guy, and we may or may not have in the past had a look at Big Kid. That's a pretty interesting play. Yeah. But back to Yellow Bowl, as you pointed out, there is some continuity between the two sections here. From here, our northernmost line to our southernmost line here, just to the west. That's around 500 meters. So not only is this chargeability anomaly very expansive from a north-south perspective, we're essentially seeing 20 millivolts and above, for the entirety of these lines. We're seeing it in east-west dimensions as well. So that's one of the important questions we want to address moving forward is how big is this thing? It'd be really cool to do another sort of northwest-southeast line just to the west of line 1 over here, just to see how far this thing actually extends to the west. And all things being equal, we know the stratigraphy's dipping, or it's younging to the east, maybe down is to the west, and maybe that's where the high-grade copper gold deposit is. So that's a question we'd like to address in this year. So.
And the surface showings too, to have that grab right by that pink, that's a nice kind of cross-reference. It looks like there's that one furthest to the right there.
Yeah, you've got it. And I'll just spin over here. So Yellow Bowl South, right over here, we've got a mixture of hydrothermal, magmatic, and intrusive breccias. And in some of these breccias, they're bringing up altered and variably mineralized porphyritic intrusive clasts. That's a very important thing. Seeing those style of breccias, those have led to the discovery globally of some fantastic deposits. Far southeast in the Philippines is one of those. Tempacan is another. It's very, very important to look at these breccias in porphyry copper gold environments, because you see oftentimes you'll see later breccias that are bringing up something from depth. They're essentially free drill holes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And this view is stunning too, isn't it? right? To
Yeah.
see the two lines with hotspots near surface and the grab samples that you did in between these two lines on this wonderful view.
Oh, excellent. No, I'm happy to hear you say, Peter. And you made this point earlier. When you see geophysical responses like this, the most important thing that we could do moving forward is more geophysics. We've got pretty interesting responses right underneath south zone. We've got to figure out how far these things actually go. They're wide open.
And logistically, you could run more lines of IP kind of looking in this view that we have here where those grabs were done on surface, kind of cross hatching these first two lines.
Absolutely. I think it would be a fantastic idea to step out to the west and do another north-south line at Yellow Bull, get an idea of what this thing looks like in 3D,
Yeah.
and just try to demonstrate how big it actually is. We're essentially elephant hunting here.
Yeah.
We're
With
trying
great exposure and all the joys of that.
Yep, yep, absolutely, Peter. No, you're totally correct. We're definitely looking forward to moving this thing ahead with lots more geologic mapping, alteration studies, and geophysics this year.
Yeah. And thinking back to a random slide on your presentation deck from um, my own reading and stuff, I'd point out that you've identified kind of clearly where you think the prospect generators fit and should focus, and it's all very much tied up with this kind of stuff, right? So it's great to see it. As I say, look over your shoulder a little bit here with it.
Yeah, right on, Peter. No, we were really fortunate in September, even though we were under the gun in terms of time and winter was coming.
Yeah.
We were fortunate to be able to tour 3 different mining companies on the project. And as I mentioned earlier, these are big companies that operate on different timelines than we do. And it takes a while to get deals done with
You did not have these 2018 grab results or these geophysical lines when you toured, or did you?
No, we did not. So yeah, these guys, the representatives from these mining companies visited the properties essentially right in the middle of the program.
Yeah.
And they didn't have access to the data at the time. But since then, we've revisited all of these groups, showed them what we found, essentially, what our new exploration model is. And we've been told that they're interested. Again, you're dealing with big companies, and it takes a while to get a deal done. But that's certainly something that we've done time and time again in the past. And I'm confident that we're going to be able to secure partners to move one or a number of our projects forward this year. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think of people who speculate on Howe Street and what they talk about. Oh, what do you look for? What's a good company look like? This and that. And one of the things that people mention, doing what you say you're going to do. Having clear plans and kind of sticking to them as best as possible in this. And it's good to see some example of this here, right? Even limited work windows are always frustrating, but it's very much an intellectual exercise at this point of figuring out what to do, right? And doing it in cost-effective manner.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and doing it the right way. And that's one of the benefits of getting involved with a major mining company that has deep pockets from an exploration standpoint. Porphyries are huge systems. They're very expensive to explore. And if you want to do it correctly, I think the project generator way is one way to accomplish that. And
for something like this that's never had a drill hole, right? And you see these views, is there any other perspective that you'd give us on these lines with these grabs?
That's a good question, Peter. We certainly need more geophysics, and this is one thing that Jeff mentioned about the property after he visited that really resonated with me. He says, the Golden Triangle is exceptionally rugged. We're looking at nunataks, lots of cliffs, steep country, lots of glaciers, crevasses. But one of the most traversable properties in the Golden Triangle is Todd Creek. You can actually walk along Yellow Bull. You can do IP surveys, and you're not fearing for your life. So.
Well, and that's clear. If you lift up the view or change the yaw or whatever, and move up, I think that becomes clear because all the area where all those grabs were done is the area in between these lines, right? And so you talk about traversable, yes. And outside of those two lines, is it still? We saw the topography a bit before, and it's not. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll see. Bear with me here. I'll see if I can. There we go. So here's the DEM. Let me just zoom in. Yeah, so here's the Todd Creek Valley.
Yeah.
Here's the ridge that Yellowbull's on, and as you can see, it's not as rugged as things get in the Golden Triangle. It's a place where you can do a significant amount of damage, with boots on the ground style work.
And there's no glaciers creeping around in there that are obstructing access or significantly.
No, certainly we see a glacier upstream of the VMS zone, just to the southeast here. But it definitely doesn't preclude exploration of the area. So, as I mentioned earlier, in the wake of this receding glacier, we've got outcropping VMS over a large area, and that's something that we'd like to follow up on with detailed mapping this year. So.
What a treat. All right, let's stop this recording for now. Thanks.
Sounds good, Peter.
All right, this is Peter Bell again. I'm here with Tyler Ruks. Tyler, Sparrowhawk, the Babine, more BC mining.
Excellent. Right on, Peter. Thanks again for doing this. So back in January, we were very fortunate to acquire the Sparrowhawk project from a well-known prospector, surveyor in Kamloops named Roland Menard. He's a lovely guy. He left the property with a fantastic data set. He did some very diligent work there himself, created an exploration model, and we've got big shoes to fill. We're really looking forward to continuing where Roland left off. And again, earlier, Peter, we were talking about majors moving on big porphyry copper gold deposits in British Columbia. In the past year, we've seen Newmont make a move on Galore. We saw Newcrest purchase Red Chris from Imperial. And again, yesterday Newmont bought into GT. So what big porphyries are left in the province for majors to partner up with or purchase outright? And my answer to that would be the Babine District porphyries. There's some very, very large, exceptional deposits here in the Babine. The Bell deposit, which is just at the south end of our claim group here. And Peter, do we actually have the screen share going?
We do. Yep,
we
we're
do.
Good.
Sorry about that. Bell deposit is owned by Glencore. It's a past producer. But there's actually a really big resource associated with this thing. 500 million tons of close to 0.4% copper, 0.2 grams gold. And one thing that's not well publicized, although this is referenced in the 95 CIM papers on Bell, is this thing is wide open at depth. Essentially, the copper gold mineralization that came out of Bell when it was in production was associated with QSP alteration. That's essentially grade destructive alteration in a sense. The take-home point here is that the potassic altered high-grade copper gold enriched core to Bell has never been found. These systems are relatively young, in contrast to the Golden Triangle porphyries, which are around 200 MA, 190 MA. We're looking at systems that are Eocene in age. So these things are 50 million years old. Yeah. So not still warm, but a lot younger than the Golden Triangle assets. So Bell is a big deposit. It's completely open to depth. It's owned by Glencore, and we were fortunate to stake absolutely all around Bell. We managed to stake the proposed waste and tailings facilities for Bell should it re-enter production. We've definitely heard through the rumor mill that some serious mining companies are evaluating the deposit.
Sorry, you said you staked the tailings?
No, we so in
or somebody else did and you optioned.
Yeah, so in 2012, Xstrata did significant engineering study on some proposed waste and tailings management facilities should Bell re-enter production. Yep. That ground lapsed, and we were able to acquire it. So if anything happens at Bell, someone presumably is going to have to talk to us because they're going to need room for tailings and waste, presumably. But we do have that ground. We're fortunate to have staked it. And importantly, we have the Sparrowhawk project itself, which is prospective in its own right. You see 3 stars on the project. These are the 3 main mineral occurrences that Roland Menard and predecessors worked up. Sparrowhawk is essentially a system of high-grade breccias. A disseminated chalcozone, or DCA, just to the north is exactly like it sounds. It's a bunch of early Jurassic Hazelton group intermediate volcanic rocks full of quartz magnetite chalcoveins. So probably spatially associated with an Eocene porphyry that's yet to be discovered. BFP zone is essentially mineralized porphyritic intrusives in float in a logging slash. They're running 0.15, 0.2% copper with anomalous gold as well. Very similar to the Eocene porphyries that host Bell and Morrison to the north. And these things have never been traced to source. And look at the scale here. We're seeing these things, over a 10-kilometer strike length. Sparrowhawks underlain by, a fantastic mag high. All these things are road accessible, and they haven't been drilled, which is somewhat mind-blowing for me. Stepping back again, Bell isn't the only big porphyry here. If you go another 10 kilometers to the north, you get Morrison. That's a big deposit in its own right. It's close to 250 million tons, 0.4% copper, 0.2 grams gold. This thing, similar to Bell, is completely wide open at depth. The deepest hole at Morrison, I think, is around 466 meters. Over the entirety of the hole, it averaged 0.7 copper, 0.4 grams gold. They haven't found the bornite, evidently, and there's a huge geophysical anomaly, a big MT anomaly underneath it that doesn't get a lot of press. So these Babine systems, unlike Red Chris, KSM, they're late Triassic, early Jurassic counterparts. These things have never been tested to depth. All things being equal, I think there's an opportunity, to demonstrate that the Eocene porphyries have potential to contain high-grade porphyry copper gold deposits underneath these historic resources, and that's the thesis we're essentially going to be testing this year.
Wonderful.
But our properties are all essentially contiguous. We've got Bell surrounded, and our ground is contiguous with Pacific Booker. I'd be remiss in stating the following, Peter. There are some challenges to working in the district. Was it 10 years ago? Pacific Booker applied for an environmental assessment certificate from the BC government. That wasn't issued, but it has been appealed. And we've heard through the rumor mill in town that something is happening on the permitting side. I'm not entirely sure what, but if you look at Pacific Booker's share price performance since December, certainly something is afoot. HDI is also a neighbor in the district. They've essentially staked absolutely everything to the east of us and to the north of us. So I suspect they're probably watching the Pacific Booker saga as well. So definitely stay tuned to the Babine district. Again, are these the next porphyries that majors are going to make a move on in the province? If they do, we're perfectly positioned to capitalize on it.
Yeah. Amazing to contrast the topographical setting.
Yeah, absolutely. This is
Drive up targets here.
No glaciers or ice fields here, Peter. Just lots of glacial till, which is a challenge in its own right.
Yeah. Opportunity.
Yeah. So earlier you made a really good observation, Peter. The Babine district is absolutely full of glacial till, and an effective way of exploring in districts like this is looking at glacial till geochemistry. The BC government did a big till survey in the Babine in 2002, and some of the biggest and best anomalies from that survey are smack in the middle of our project. And these are things that we're looking forward to following up on this field season. We hope to have crews on the property in June. So essentially, these are the till anomalies, and these are the ice directions. And here's the Sparrowhawk showing BFP survey, BFP showing over here, and the disseminated calco zone over here. One really interesting thing about the property too, Pete, is a very significant structure that controls the emplacement of these big Babine porphyries. Essentially crosses the property. It bisects it, and that's called the Morrison-Newman fault. And it's an extensional fault that downdrops everything on the west side of it. And that's very, very important because at Bell and Morrison, it's led to the preservation of the entire porphyry copper gold system. And that's a fantastic opportunity for us because the west side of the Morrison-Newman fault on the property has never been explored. And one thing we do know is that we're seeing some fantastic sheeted quartz veins with associated epithermal gold-silver polymetallic mineralization on the west side of this fault. Is that sort of the upper manifestation of a buried Eocene porphyry system like Bell or Morrison? That's something that we're going to be working up in this field season.
And the east side, erosion then? Some pretty significant erosion around here?
Yeah, so on the east side of the property, we're essentially looking at early Jurassic intermediate volcanic rocks of the Hazelton group. And if you go on the west side of the fault, you're looking at a downdrop block where you're essentially preserving Bowser Basin seds, so Jurassic and Cretaceous stratigraphy, and all of that stuff has been cross-cut in this district by the Eocene porphyries, and that's why you're preserving the entirety of Bell and Morrison, because you're on the west side of the fault where all this stratigraphy and associated intrusions have been downdropped.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting to hear mention of the sedimentary unit to the west too. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, it's really important for the Eocene story because it's just an opportunity to preserve these porphyry systems in their entirety, and that's why the high grade cores to these things haven't been found. There hasn't been deep drilling to test these systems because the whole shebang is preserved. So it's an exceptional opportunity from an exploration standpoint.
Exciting, yeah.
Yeah, so onto the east side of the property where we actually have showings, Peter. As you can see, all the red lines here, these are roads, so you can drive absolutely everywhere here. Yeah. No helicopters required. All of the green squares are geochemical samples. It's copper we're looking at, 0.1% and above. So you don't have to work very hard to find anomalous to high-grade copper on the property. This is the Sparrowhawk showing at the south end. It's essentially a hydrothermal magmatic breccia, altered porphyritic intrusive class with a matrix of magnetite and gold-enriched chalcopyrite. It's underlain by a big mag high. To our knowledge, it hasn't been drill tested. It's part of a much larger zone of copper gold enrichment, not just in rock geochemistry, but in soils and streams as well. So that's a target that we're certainly looking forward to working up this year.
And that
low-hanging fruit.
Some oxidized copper in there too?
Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely seeing some malachite staining but we're definitely seeing lots of sulfides as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Different oxidation boundaries maybe over time, or
that's a really good question. I wouldn't. I don't think there was supergene at Bell, but I'm gonna have to read about that. Certainly, if I wouldn't be surprised to see some. There was definitely supergene at Gibraltar. There was some at Afton. I know there was some at Comess as well. I certainly wouldn't be surprised to see it in the Babine as well. But very good question.
I always wonder when you see fresh and oxide stuff, but I guess it's probably more common than I realize.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing some oxidization, Peter, but there no problem finding sulfides in the area as well.
Maybe one question about the way those two kind of trend lines that you have, right, going up from BFP to Sparrowhawk,
right
there, and that meeting the other one going off the Morrison, I believe that is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe these are some structures from the 2005 BCGS geological compilation. Yeah. But certainly the big one is the Morrison-Newman fault, and that's the critical one for emplacement of these Eocene porphyries. But so 3-4 kilometers north of the Sparrowhawk high-grade breccias, we've got the disseminated chalcozone, package of intermediate volcanics that are probably early Jurassic in age, lower Hazelton group rocks, and they're cross-cut by this widespread, sort of weakly to moderately developed stockwork of quartz magnetite chalcopyrite mineralization. And, that's the hallmark of potassic alteration in porphyry copper gold systems. We just haven't found the causative intrusion yet. So that's, a relatively new logging road, new exposure, essentially, a new discovery that just hasn't been followed up. So we couldn't be more excited to visit this thing and do some more mapping and sampling, and hopefully some more geophysics in order to refine exploration models this year. So.
And with the forest cover, how does that affect, your range of work programs you might seek to do there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Certainly the level of exposure on the west side of the property, as you drop over onto the west side of the Morrison-Newman fault, the exposure is somewhat lackluster. There's a lot more till, but one exploration tool that's proven effective for finding porphyries in this area is essentially RC or percussion drilling. And I know Pacific Empire has been doing a fair amount of that. And Riverside did that to a great success with Antofagasta during their exploration alliance on the west side of Babine Lake. Lanac Lake, I believe, was the property, and that was 10 years ago or so. So that's definitely a tool that we'd like to have at our disposal as well.
Yeah, great to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. And BFP trend just at the northeast side. These are logging slashes containing float boulders of QSP to potassic altered biotite feldspar porphyries that are dead ringers to the causative intrusions, the mineralized intrusions at Bell and Morrison. They're just hanging out in a logging slash, and they haven't been traced to source. So.
Well, and it's funny to hear you mention RC drilling too, just because, people hear drilling and they might think, what's Arcwest doing talking about drilling?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. It all comes down to cost here. We're definitely strict adherence to the project generator model. We'll definitely be using that model to explore Sparrowhawk. We're really excited to get a partner on board to advance the project, and if we're lucky to do that, we'll definitely be using RC and percussion for that purpose. But
well, and to hear you say June as well, right? That's
Yep, absolutely. It's one of the one of the good things about having 8 projects throughout all of the big metallitechs in British Columbia. Not only are we in the in the Golden Triangle, but we're also elsewhere in the province where we benefit from a longer exploration season. And that's
Yeah.
always important from a pubco standpoint, because you've got the opportunity to generate news flow over a greater period of time.
Yeah. And there is still some exposure here too, right? Like if you were to go out and do some more exhaustive work mapping and sampling the breccias that you know of, and like that's a reasonable work program, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're logging like crazy up in this
Oh,
area,
great.
Peter. I'm actually
Yeah.
have some family who log up in this neck of the woods as well. And so every year there are new roads, and with every new road that's built, there's the opportunity to expose new bedrock
Yeah.
and make new discoveries. In a sense, it's quite similar to receding glaciers in the Golden Triangle. Every year you've got new outcrop to look at, and that's an exciting opportunity for us.
And airborne, like drone-based magnetics and stuff, any idea if that gets how that works on areas that have been kind of clear cut and or if selective logging? I don't know what kind of method they're using around here.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Peter. That's one thing we haven't done in the past is use drone-based magnetics. We've primarily worked with fixed-wing aircraft or helicopters equipped with stingers. Yeah, that's a really good question. I know other companies have been moving, in that direction. Maybe that's something we can look into
Well,
for
or even the
Sparrow.
plane, fixed wing based stuff. I guess that's a tool at your disposal. I'd think that getting geo boots on the ground is probably the priority, but
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons why we've avoided things like drones in the Golden Triangle, maybe other groups have used them to success, but in environments like that where you've got high winds, it's just the aircraft, they're so small they get blown around. Whereas if you've got a helicopter and a Stinger, Harman Kaiser's group, Precision Geophysics, yeah, they've done fantastic work for us in the past, and we'd love to work with them again. So.
yeah, and that's not to be taken for granted, right? Because some of these programs up there, helicopter-based stuff, can really, be disrupted by operator or conditions, or it's not, you can't take that stuff for granted up
Yeah,
there.
absolutely, right on. So I'm going to skip forward a slide here, and we're going to have a quick look
Mm,
at some airborne mag data. So the property was flown, I think, around 10 years ago, fairly tight line spacing. And what we're looking at here is the Sparrowhawk. Let's focus in on the Sparrowhawk breccias. So these are high-grade breccias, and I believe there's historic grab samples from the zone that I think are running up to like 5% copper with close to a gram gold. Don't believe it's ever been drilled. And there's a huge amount of magnetite in the matrix of these breccias. And that's associated with the golden-rich chalcopyrite mineralization. And the cool thing here, Peter, is it's underlain by a big mag high. Here's the scale, 500 meters. Here's a road going right through it. It's never been drilled. We definitely know that similar breccias in the area, can actually be important. The Hearn Hill breccias, just southeast of Morrison, sound very similar from a geological standpoint. Lots of magnetite in the system. They're copper gold enriched as well. Similar host rocks, all things being equal. Maybe Sparrowhawk is a Hearn Hill analog, and I find it unbelievable that this hasn't seen drilling, or at least drilling that's in the public domain. So.
yeah. I wonder those mag levels there, how much does that compare to topography, and like you're pretty confident about the signal you're getting?
Yeah, I feel pretty confident about Sparrowhawk breccias, Peter, especially just because they're absolutely teeming with magnetite. So no surprise that there's a magnetic anomaly underneath
Great.
it. The important thing for us is that it's not a small one. So it'd be really cost effective for us to drag a drill in and test this thing. Of course, we're project generators. We'd like to do that with a partner. So.
Wonderful. And exposure, this area, was this one of the areas that was logged?
It was logged in the past. I'm going to have to look at some new imagery for the area to see what the closest slash is. But yeah, that's definitely something that we're going to have to look at moving.
Well, the road going through means it's drive up, right, for the field team.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it couldn't get easier. And we put out a news release, I think a couple days back, to announce a field program on our Tita Creek project. And that's an even younger porphyry on northern Vancouver Island. It's still warm. The thing is only 6.5 million years old.
Amazing.
It's just to the south of the Pemberton Hills lithocap, which is older, and that's subject to an earn-in agreement with Freeport McMoran. So there's some big groups looking at northern Vancouver Island. I just noticed that Garrett Ainsworth of Alpha Vision Hathor fame, they've moved into the northern Vancouver Island Porphyry Copper District as well. They picked up an interesting project. So it's heating up, Peter, and we're happy to be there.
What amazing in May to hear you mobilizing to Vancouver Island, and June talking about the Babine here a little bit further north, in BC, but not, still drive up and very accessible. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we're really fortunate to have all these projects in our portfolio. It gives us a longer field season. And hopefully moving forward, our field season will be even longer because we've, since 2015, through a private company, Seven Devils, we've been working up several targets in the USA. Early porphyry copper gold opportunities. Some of these things are unstaked. Some are owned by local prospectors. And these are things that we'd like to move into Arcwest in the near term. And hopefully that'll manifest in an even longer exploration season and more news flow than we currently have.
Yeah. No, that's excellent to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, good stuff, Peter. Well, I think on that note, unless you've got some other questions, it's getting awfully close to beer o'clock. So.
Right. Let's do it. I'll stop the recording here. Thanks. Well, this has sure been fun. Tyler, thank you very much for all your time today.
Oh, Peter, likewise. My apologies that it took so long to get around to this. We've been busy talking to potential partners. So with 8 projects in the stable, that keeps us busy. So.
Well, I've been watching this company for a couple years now. First heard about it, Sprott Natural Resource Symposium, must have been summer 2017, at the Mill Rock booth there, and watching them change and grow. And I wonder if they'll exist next year, or if there's the potential for some takeovers amongst the prospect generators on Howe Street there.
Absolutely, Peter. And
it's the first time I've heard all this story from you, though, and really got to start diving into the rich layers of information that you have. I can't imagine quite what your partners go through, figuring out if they're going to option properties from you and stuff like this. So.
That's right. Yeah, well, we're confident that we're going to be able to get a partner in place for at least one or a number of our projects to move these assets forward this year, Peter. And one thing I've got to say too, Peter, is Greg and Phil and the team at Millrock did an exceptional job of assembling these golden triangle assets during some very difficult times in the market. And without their help and support, Arcwest wouldn't have happened. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Greg and Phil and the team. And we couldn't be more excited for the season, Peter.
Yeah,
and
certainly.
we sure appreciate your support. And you asked some fantastic questions. So thanks for the opportunity.
Pleasure. I look forward to doing it again.
Excellent. Likewise, Peter.
Goodbye.